I was there, when Rareware left Nintendo to join those Microsoft pig dogs and slowly fade into a shadow of their former selves under their new uncaring American overlords. Those were dark days. Hey, what's going on, people? So, going into the new year, I'm hoping to get more general discussions out this year, like I used to, as well as put out more videos showing my history and also the games I own. Something this channel was always meant to be about. But this isn't a channel update. This is a video about something I've been meaning to talk about for a while. I will also have another general discussion centering on Western gaming following, at some point as well. So, hopefully look forward to that one. But in regards to this video, it's pretty simple question, I feel. Rareware, they were once Nintendo's Western gaming development right hand. During the SNES and N64 era, when Rareware, really made or really became prevalent as a studio, synonymous with the big N. I guess, with at the time, Nintendo also having a 49% stake in Rareware, if I remember correctly, effectively making them a second-party studio, which they were. Of course, Rareware were developing games on the NES for Nintendo, great ones, may I add. But, like I said, it wasn't, I haven't even said it yet, it wasn't until the SNES, or more specifically, the release of Donkey Kong Country, where Nintendo took notice and went, these guys know their shizzle, and we desire them for all manner of things, whether it's games and tech, etc. Without going into the history, we know what Rareware achieved with Nintendo. Nothing short of industry-changing, culture-defining gaming greatness. Where that legacy still holds strong to this day and still influences many other developers. But as we know, things went belly up, at the end of the N64 era, and after the release of Star Fox Adventure, on the GameCube, Nintendo let Rare go for how much was it? It was like the staggering sum of like $350 million or something like that, if I remember correctly. If you weren't there at the time, you have no idea how painful this was to many of us Nintendo fans. I mean, for myself, it was also around the same time Sega left the hardware market and became a software company. That's a dark story for another time. But if anyone knows me, just imagine how I felt losing both Rare and Sega in the same time period.
I'm gonna jump! Bill, get back in there! No! What are you doing up there?
Be reasonable!
Dark times, people. But, but since that time, I've been continuously saying to many people that Nintendo needed to regain that Western arm for themselves. But I personally think that it's that is utterly necessary for them to have a close, strong Western developer working with them and creating exclusive games for Western tastes on their platforms. Because as we've seen in the past and present, Nintendo can't fully trust, most, if at all, any third-party developer to create consistent, great content for their platforms, with no issues. So, have any Western developers close to Nintendo stepped up to the mark and have replaced what Rareware used to offer? My initial answer is no. Not even close. But and that's a big but, and I cannot lie. But there have certainly been other developers with more than enough talent, and certainly some games which have shown that if all puzzle pieces were in the right place, then what Rareware used to achieve as that strong Western arm for Nintendo, it could easily be replaced, or I say easily, it could be replaced, or for continued argument's sake, could have been replaced, which is what I'll get into now. So during the N64 era and certainly into the GameCube era, outside of Rareware, I was screaming for one other studio to make a permanent partnership with Nintendo and produce content exclusively for them. That studio was Factor 5. As far as I remember, Factor 5 were established in Germany, and was it Germany? Yeah. And I know they later expanded to the US, but during the 90s they became well known for the Turrican series of games, a series I myself have history and fond memories with. Which actually reminds me, I need to pick up the Turrican compilation on the Switch. I've been meaning to buy that for ages. It's only that expensive. But Factor 5's name really started to reach the masses when they began developing the Rogue Squadron series on the N64 and GameCube in partnership with LucasArts. That's how I feel. Outside of their incredible, technical skills when it came to pushing 3D graphics, they also became very well known for their sound design mastery. As for myself, I would use Rogue Squadron's surround sound tests on my N64 and GameCube for my surround sound speakers. Factor 5's use of Dolby sound was immaculately and truly brought their games and Nintendo hardware to life. I'll never forget like that TIE fighter flying around the screen and hearing it on my surround sound, just so good. I also remember being crazy excited for their new Tornado 64 game, which was unfortunately cancelled. But man, you have no idea of both how impressed I was of the released audio track, and how much I listened to it back in the day when the internet was still young. I mean, okay, I tell you what, just listen to this. I remember what it's that I just remember that it's running on the N64 sound chip and not CD. Okay. I mean, it's just too good, right? And of course, by now most people know that Factor 5 worked on the sound compression for the incredible port of Resident Evil 2 on the N64. Another stunning game for that system, a game which should have also been ported to the Saturn people. Curse you, Sony and Capcom. But as cruel fate let us know, things didn't go well for Factor 5 after the GameCube. And after making the initially, technically brilliant, yet gameplay flawed layer exclusive for the PS3, Factor 5 came to a close. We later found out that they were attempting a Kid Icarus reboot for the Wii, but also more excitedly for myself, they were also working on a unreleased new take of the Pilot Wing series for the Wii, which would have also used like a Wii Connect 24 for real world times, as you played the game. I can't even begin to imagine how good that game might have been, based off how good flying was in the Rogue Squadron series. And also, if I remember correctly, they pretty much had completed a Rogue Squadron game for the Wii. I just feel that Factor 5 could have been a massive Western studio for Nintendo if things worked out. They could have greatly assisted them with sound design, something many could argue is something that Nintendo needs help with. But I feel like with their, and when I say sound design, I'm more primarily talking about the output, the sound quality itself and stuff. But I feel like with their development skills, Factor 5 could have created their own original IPs for the big end, whilst also working with them on existing IPs that cater to the swiftly growing taste for Western gaming during the N64 and GameCube era. Imagine a 3D Turrican, along the lines of a Jet Force Gemini, or Factor 5 taking on, the Star Fox IP with their Rogue Squadron skills. Something I've dreamed of, since those days, and I would have certainly believed a Factor 5 Star Fox would have been better than Namco's attempts with Star Fox Assault, which is still a good game, but I still think it's flawed. So during the GameCube era, it looked like Factor 5 could step in, but unfortunately, fate put a stop to that, and it is a shame, because still to this day, I think Factor 5's output was absolutely immense. I mean, the fact that they created Rogue Squadron in like 9 months, at a push rush for the GameCube launch, and that game still to this day looks absolutely staggering. And when that game released, this was around the time of when Lucas Films were re-releasing the original Star Wars films, and we were like comparing the movies to Rogue Squadron. That whole original Death Run and everything, with the X-Wings and stuff. It just, the GameCube and what Factor 5 done with that game was just, mind-blowing. But man, look at that game today, like I said, to me it's just staggering, and it is my favorite Star Wars game ever. I think it's the best Star Wars game ever. I don't think anything else has come close.
You too will come to understand fear as I have.
Yeah, and next up, I want to talk about Silicon Knights. I first became acquainted with them through games like The Horde on the Sega Saturn, which I've mentioned in an obscure games video I'd done a while back, and also I believe the Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen, or just the ports, stuff. But Silicon Knights really grabbed my attention when we started seeing Eternal Darkness on the N64, which we all know was later moved to the GameCube. And what an incredible game it is. It's one of my favorite horror games, in fact. And although I've completed it twice, I still need to finish that third playthrough for the final true ending. Something I'm going to try and do this year, because I think I've still got the save file. In fact, I'm pretty sure I do. But also the GameCube, Silicon Knights helped develop Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, my personal second favorite Metal Gear game. And it's due to this collaboration where we're starting to see the potential of Silicon Knights working with Nintendo on even more IPs. And based off developer comments, it was actually Hideo Kojima who suggested that Silicon Knights worked on Twin Snakes based off his love for Eternal Darkness. And based on, I believe, further comments, if I remember this, correctly, it's stated that both, Miyamoto and Iwata approached, what's his name, Dennis Dyack. He was a founder, I believe. Requesting if he would, work on Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which obviously he clearly agreed to. I don't know how true that story is, but these are the type of things that you hear. But either way, I mean, imagine being approached by Miyamoto, Iwata, and Konami, being recommended by Hideo Kojima to work on a remake of Metal Gear Solid, exclusive for the GameCube. Absolutely mind-blowing, I am sure. And unfortunately, a single game, I feel, which was Too Human, a game called Too Human, which moved between multiple platforms back in the day, seemingly, turned out to be the downfall of Silicon Knights, who I think they also fell into a lawsuit with Epic Games and obviously eventually lost, which later caused the closure of the studio. And then we of course saw the discourse around Eternal Shadows, which was the kickstarted spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness by Dennis Dyack. Which was one of those situations where you weren't sure what or who to believe, and even for what I saw of Eternal Shadows, it still got me excited. But Silicon Knights during the GameCube era, I personally saw another studio with the potential to appease the Western crowd and be that strong right arm for Nintendo in replacement of Rareware. When a company can impress the giants of Japan so quickly like that, clearly there was always potential. And still to this day, even though Silicon Knights has gone, I dream of an Eternal Darkness 2, or a third-person action game that Silicon Knights could have worked on. Genres once again which Nintendo lack in a large presence in, from a Western standpoint. Or if you remember, like in my Nintendo 8 video, I think I said, how about an Eternal Darkness game based from software, whether it's Eternal Souls or something like that. I think I named it. But anyway, once again, fate stated that Silicon Knights were not the ones to replace Rareware. Those were two companies I truly thought could have stepped up to the legacy of Rareware, and potentially produced a legacy of games, as well as showing off a great technical ability on Nintendo hardware and becoming Nintendo's new right hand and much needed Western arm. It's something to remember that Rare were technically so good with Nintendo hardware, and in many ways bested Nintendo in many of their games from a technical standpoint. Really pushing the hardware from multiple angles, not just graphically, but but sound and all this type of stuff, and creating original engines and stuff. It's Rareware were up there. But there's two other studios I'd probably like to talk about. One very briefly, but those two studios are Next Level Games and of course Retro Studios. So let's briefly talk Next Level Games.
Next Level Games is woohoo!
I personally consider Next Level Games to still be quite young, which is slightly mad, as they've been around, I think, since the GameCube days. And although they developed I think they developed Punch-Out on the Wii, if I remember. I personally feel that their name really started to get noticed with the release of Luigi's Mansion 2, which looks stunning on the 3DS, and even though other games like Metro Prime, Federation Force, seemingly hurt the Metroid IP more than it should have. And let me put this on record. I personally stand by the attempts and ideas of that game. I feel Next Level Games truly impressed Nintendo with what they achieved with Luigi's Mansion 2 and Metroid Prime Federation Force, regardless of how Federation Force was received. But I also think they truly and greatly impressed Nintendo with what they achieved with Luigi's Mansion 3 graphically and technically, and it was most likely that game which made Nintendo go, okay, we need these guys going forwards. Personally, I think Next Level Games are going to shine on Nintendo's next console and continue to impress us with their graphical and technical outputs. But what I hope doesn't happen is that they fall into the trap of being stuck on a small select amount of known Nintendo IPs, something which they kind of have been. and something which leads me onto the final studio I'll talk about. So from a Western studio standpoint, and the closest Western studio to feel like a replacement for what Rareware brought to Nintendo platforms, we of course have Retro Studios. Now, first off, we could argue that Retro's output on Nintendo platforms, as small as it might be, has in many ways outperformed what Rareware did on their biggest IPs in terms of technical mastery and arguably game design. With the Metroid Prime trilogy, soon to be a quadrilogy. God man, Metroid Prime 4, come on, just beyond hype. And Donkey Kong Country Returns, was their next game, and especially Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. You could argue that these games alone, and top anything Rareware ever made on Nintendo platforms as pieces of quality software. There's arguments there. But unfortunately for Retro Studios, all these games never reach the commercial and cultural heights that many of Rareware's games reached with the likes of Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark, etc. My frustrations with Retro Studios is purely based on their total output, and it has nothing to do with the quality of their games, which I personally consider to be peak gaming. Retro Studios have, since 2002, have essentially worked on just two Nintendo IPs for the most part, Metroid and Donkey Kong. This of course, produced gaming perfection. But it's hard not to feel like this studio's talents could have been put elsewhere as well. Specifically with new IP. Aimed more towards the Western crowd, something which both Metroid and Donkey Kong can reach, but clearly not at the sales levels they deserve, and arguably not the types of games Western gamers are looking for, although they freaking well should be, because even just looking at just from Prime 1, 2 and 3, I don't know what people are. I don't know why people are dipping out on a series. It's something I'm going to talk about soon as well. If we were in a GameCube era, or if you were in a GameCube era like me, then you would have gotten a taste of what Retro Studios was looking to do. Especially with one cancelled game called Raven Blade. The hype I had for this game, was immense. Based off its reveal trailer. One of my closest friends, loved this so much. If I remember, he had the name Raven Blade as his avatar for for years, or like his email address or something. I can't remember. But Retro Studios clearly had ideas and plans, and although history has sold them to the Metroid and Donkey Kong IPs. And also what we hear about their internal issues, that have sprung up, it's hard to ignore their potential. Something we're clearly still seeing with how stunning Metroid Prime 4 looks. I mean, if I don't think anyone else right now can do the Prime series. They've taken it to where it is, and I think Prime 4 is just going to just smoke every Prime game. I have so much confidence in it. I personally hoping that it does dethrone all the Prime games, and it should. Why not? I just wonder if Retro were, if they were given a bit more free reign with their game choices like Rareware, where they were able to create things for themselves, and Nintendo. I just wonder what we'd have from that studio, and how in my mind they would have replaced most of what Rare offered, at least from the SNES and N64. I mean, Rare's history goes way back to the 80s. They're one of the oldest studios. They clearly have talent for first person games and platformers. Retro Studios. as well as assisting, as well as assisting with racing games, it opens them up to so many possibilities that could bring in more Western tastes, which could require Nintendo to, less depend on those third-party studios who also seemingly, or always seemingly let them down. I've always asked for like a Captain Falcon third-person adventure, similar to something like Mace Griffin or Mass Effect. You've heard me say before, or even if it's not Captain Falcon, an adventure game, like that, or along the lines of Tomb Raider. Could be something that could draw much attention to Nintendo platforms from Western gamers who are itching for something along those lines from the big end. I could sit here and name a ton of gaming ideas I think Retro would excel at. But, it doesn't change the reality that their current output has been arguably minimal. Absolutely epic and peak gaming, of course, but few and far between. And, don't get me started on like other studios like Nintendo NST, in the US, who develop games like Ridge Racer 64, 1080 Avalanche, and Wave Race Blue Storm, and then got relegated to mostly like Mario vs Donkey Kong games and smaller titles. Another studio with tons of potential. So at the end of this, insanely long discussion, I apologize. Where do I fall? No, I don't think Nintendo have managed to replace Rareware as a shining and strong Western right arm I personally think they still need. But there's been a number of strong contenders, and are still those who, given a chance, and if fate allows it, could step up and start producing the type of software that calls to more Western gamers. Nintendo and their current partners, software, of course, still, hit home, and in many areas, satisfy millions of gamers. But for me, I still haven't seen the amount of diverse and unique software from a Nintendo-owned, Western studio like Rareware used to produce for them. Clearly I still desire it, or maybe it's just because I miss those old Rare games. It could literally be that. Like I said, I just desire a Jet Force Gemini 2. I'm not sure. Anyway, what are your thoughts, people? Thanks for sticking around to the end of this one if you made it, and let me know if you feel the same way as I do, or don't, or perhaps have your own unique take on what I class as that Western right arm for Nintendo. As always, thanks for listening, take care all, and peace.